President Bola Tinubu has said his administration removal of fuel subsidy was in the best interest of Nigeria, saying it was necessary not to plunge the nation into bankruptcy. He stressed the country's belief in economic collaboration and inclusiveness among other nations to drive stability on the global stage. Tinubu stated this during a panel session at the ongoing World Economic Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Sunday, which focused on global collaboration, growth, and energy for development. President Tinubu urged for greater international cooperation and inclusiveness at the opening of the Special World Economic Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Sunday, highlighting Nigeria's commitment to economic collaboration and inclusiveness. Tinubu also defended his economic reforms since assuming office. State House correspondent Adesuwa Morwa has more.
The World Economic Forum special meeting in Riyadh began on Sunday amidst global concerns including the Gaza conflict, energy transitions, and geopolitical tensions. During the plenary session titled A New Vision for Global Development, IMF Managing Director highlights the need for reforms to address weak growth rates and significant divergences.
We face two very serious problems. The first one is the one that you outlined. Growth, yes, 3.2% for this year, but really weak by historical standards. And two, significant divergence across the world. Some countries doing really well and others falling behind.
To remove the...
President Bola Tinubu, in his remarks, addressed the economic policies implemented since assuming office, especially focusing on the contentious issue of subsidy removal. He emphasized the government's commitment to mitigating the impact on vulnerable populations while justifying the currency management as crucial measures to eliminate arbitrage and corruption.
There's no doubt that it was a necessary action for my country not to go bankrupt. One, to reset the economy and the pathway to growth. It is going to be difficult, but the hallmark of leadership is taking difficult decisions at a time it ought to be taken decisively. We were able to manage that and partition the economic drawback and the fallout of the subsidy removal. Equally, it engendered transparency, accountability, and physical discipline for the country.
In discussing global cooperation, President Tinubu stresses the importance of inclusivity in capital formation, just as his Rwandan counterpart criticizes what he calls the hypocrisy of the developed countries, while urging Africa to avoid a victim mentality.
Capital formation that is necessary to drive the economy, like agriculture, food security, innovation, technology advancement, must be an inclusive program of the entire world. No one should be left behind.
The inclusiveness that we are talking about and collaboration that brings different entities of the world together. So for that, we must be able to call out hypocrisy for whenever we see it. And it is there because we keep talking about north-south divide or other divides, but we don't find easily and quickly the solution to that. Yet we can. We know that we can do that. Now, two things have to happen. The rest of the world have got to see that this is an important place to invest with and invest in. That's one. Second is for Africa itself to avoid any victim mentality and start raising ourselves to the level where we should be, in fact, where we are.
is there any way we can see a stabilization in your surroundings in the years to come, or is it does it look very, very grim?
Thank you very much. We are encouraging the entire world to pay attention to SAE and the countries around us and ECOWAS. As the chairman of the ECOWAS, I've witnessed a big influence of Nigeria to discourage unconstitutional change of government. That is stabilizing. Equally, we have eased the sanctions. We need to trade with one another, not fight each other. It is very, very necessary. As the world paid attention to the poverty level of SAE and the rest of ECOWAS, are we going to pay only a big brother's role in a talk show without necessary action?
The forum, themed Global Collaboration, Growth and Energy for Development, has gathered leaders from various sectors to discuss global development strategies. Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
Joining us now on the morning show is Paul Alaje to take a look at the World Economic Forum special meeting on global collaboration, growth and energy for development. Dr. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist and Senior Partner at SPM Professionals. Dr. Alaje, you didn't tell me you've completed your PhD, because I knew you were doing it, you were on it at a point. You didn't tell me you completed. So there are implications. You need to talk to me after the show, and we need to celebrate together. Congratulations. And let me be the first to congratulate you, Dr. Paul Alaje. But really, let's go straight to it this morning.
Thank you so very much.
Let's go straight to it this morning. What the president said, is it really tenable? Are we not back to paying subsidy? Didn't this hurt the people even more? Are we not back to paying more as regards subsidy? That bankruptcy we're running away for, are we not near that level now?
Yeah, thank you so very much. Good morning, my brother and friend, Mr. Rufai and Ayo. I want to say thank you for inviting me. First, when the president mentioned the fact that if subsidy had not been removed at that time, Nigeria could have been bankrupt. Here is the issue. When you look at what we're paying in subsidy, and what we're paying for subsidy, and you add that to our debt service, it will appear that Nigeria, we have nothing left to pay. No thanks to the previous administration because of the management of the economy that we have. The question now is, we have President Tinubu in office. What were the options before the table? The option at that time was first to end the ongoing oil theft within the Niger Delta region. If you had done that, we would have increased our revenue significantly from what is coming from that region. Again, there are other revenue windows that government could have adopted, which of course they were not done at that particular point. So if we want to go with the situation of things without making extra efforts regarding oil and non-oil exports that could have generated more revenue for us or more income for the country, then I think the president will have a point. But in a case where we have these opportunities and we have not maximized them, then the question will be, what is the cost? In economics, when we talk of the cost of subsidy, it is not trillions of naira. That's not the cost. The cost of subsidy is the true cost. The true cost of subsidy is, if you say that you have not removed subsidy, what will it have cost us in the real sense? So that's it. Two, what is the cost on the people of Nigeria? Coming from Lagos today to Abuja, from Lagos to Abuja, there were queues everywhere in different gas stations, different filling stations, people struggling to pay because of acute shortage of the same PMS that we thought had been liberalized. You recall that I spoke with you and your colleagues earlier in the year where we asked if, as subsidy has been removed now, last year, that do I think that that is the end, there will be no scarcity? No. Supply chain, we still have fundamental supply chain issues. And reports and research also reveal that we are still paying subsidy even today. And the good news is to those in government, especially the federal, state, and local government, their revenue has since increased. But by the time minimum wage is announced, Lagos State just made an announcement. Imagine if federal government announced minimum wage to be not less than 100,000, which I think is what is the least that we should be looking at as a nation. Most of the states that feels they have monies, by the time they pay that money, I'm telling you, we may be back in square zero where we started from. The question is, are we going to now remove subsidy again? So when we advise or we make a presentation assertion to economic issues, we are saying we need to think holistically such that we don't just look for the easy way out in the case of subsidy.
So you're saying, from what I hear, is that this administration might have taken the easy way out in the case of subsidy at the very beginning when they said subsidy is gone. Now, another policy I'd like you to...
No, that's the...
Sorry, go on.
Okay, I said that's the easiest way,
yeah.
Because when you look at the revenue as at the time the president was coming in, the revenue of the country was really low, coupled with the fact that we have huge debt service, not to pay back the debt, but to service the debt. The third one was the amount we're spending, about 6.6 trillion half a year to service, for a full year, for subsidy. So when you put all of this together in the light of what we were generating as revenue, it was clear that removing subsidy for government was the easiest thing to do so that they can improve the book. Now, when we improve the book, what we are not conscious of is that we cannot clap with one hand. The question is, what are the prices of things, including the project of government? Wait till 2025 budget is passed and compare line by line what government would have spent in 2022 compared to what government would spend in 2025. And you see that most of those items would increase to be charitable by 60 to 70%. But in the real sense, you might see over 100% increase in expenditure of government, not because we are building more, but because of one, inflation, because of exchange rate disparities, and because of current economic realities. So in one hand, we are giving, in the other hand, we are losing.
Oh, I hear you. Thank you. Now, for the man who's watching, man who's watching, the Nigerian who is suffering the effects of this policy that the president has consistently defended as being in the best interest of Nigeria, what are some of the immediate things? Because one of the criticisms of this policy direction is not the fact that he announced a subsidy, or that subsidy was gone, was that it wasn't well thought out. And there were certain things that ought to have been put in place, or at least guaranteed, before going ahead to remove it, even though he said he had no other options. But as president, he has a responsibility to ensure that the people do not suffer or even perish as a result of this policy. What are some of those things that he ought to have done that hasn't been done yet? Some of the promises made, including, like you talked about, the wages, minimum wage. We've talked about the review of this. This hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen that translate into action. We haven't seen, we've heard of some palliatives, buses and all that. CND buses, we're still talking about it, even though announcements have been made. But what are some of those things that ought to be done, despite this necessary move, so that at least it cushions the effects for Nigerian people?
Okay, thank you so much. A number of things that should have been done, which of course have not been done. Number one is end oil theft in the Niger Delta region. That will boost our foreign reserve. I started with that because subsidy is gone. Marketers are hoping to renew their licenses. Independent marketers, there is a challenge with that. Out of 15,000, we have about 1,000. The fuel is not even in most places when people need to buy at high prices. One of the television stations reported that fuel in Sokoto State, it's about 2,000 per liter. Meanwhile, black market in Abuja is between 1,000 to 2,000, to 1,200, 1,300. In some other places, it's lower. In some places, it's higher. So it depends on proximity, perhaps to Lagos or where the major depots are. That's what varies. So when you look at it, another factor influencing this is exchange rate, because we don't refine PMS. I've heard about Port Harcourt refinery. I've heard about Dangote refinery. I know some effort is being put in place. I know there are some production coming up. But when you look at that in light of our needs, in light of our consumption, you know that we are still far off compared to where we should be today. So we need to resolve issues around the sector. Two, palliative. I'm happy the president listened when government said they were going to share 5,000 naira. And some of us were very vehement in criticizing that will not solve the problem. And the president, I think 48 hours after, said no, he wants to review the policy. But the review was to now support governors by giving, I think, 40 billion or so to each state governor to share rice. You saw what happens to artificial, the demand for rice. It went really up, coupled with other institutional challenges, and the price of rice went from then, I think 48,000, now to about 70,000. I don't know if the price has reduced now, but at the time where that demand was made. So if you want to provide palliatives for people, we need to know what are we providing solution to. I've heard about CNG, and even in Europe, where the CNG vehicle are expected to be coming from, production has stopped because of environmental challenges. So production of CNG vehicle has stopped. My concern was just the National Assembly when a senator proposed that Nigeria should be using electric vehicle. And I saw how the bill was turned down in the National Assembly. Today, unfortunately, we still have to go to electric cars. So if Labour and the federal government truly want to solve the problem, we need to have electric buses all over our country. Now, we have another challenge. We have a minister that said that people are putting on fridge in their homes, and even when the thing is size. I don't know if our fridges should become cupboards, because that is what it's meant to be. And I heard that the minister came back to apologize, which is fine. But, you know, in making statements, especially for public office holders, it's important to think through those statements very, very carefully. It's 16 hours to 20 hours. Your TV station is quite reputable. You can run a pool, you know, for people within band A. If truly in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks that the policy have started, if they have gotten up to 16 hours power supply, from experience, I will tell you the answer. It's a big no. In between the policy implementation, we have seen transmission company of Nigeria collapse. So we cannot be solving one policy and we are not looking at the economy as a whole. Nigeria economy needs an holistic review. If you are running a reform, it should not be just for a few sectors. There is need for an holistic review. So we can provide some palliative, but will it solve the problem? The answer is no. So for me, I think that government, we need to look at how do we support private sector to look at production, or maybe to partner with some foreign organization for us to look at how do we make electric vehicles available in Nigeria, and within a decent rate, such that the impact that it has on labor and on consumption will not be. So the issue of minimum wage. Minimum wage is very critical. It's not maximum wage. And for me, I think that over the years, Nigeria has stayed between $100 to $200 equivalent. From what I've seen in empirical literature, it has been between $100 to $200. If you convert that at today's rate, and we want to be charitable as a Nigerian, we know that minimum wage will be inching towards 100,000, but not more than 200,000. So when we do that, it will reduce some impact. But the truth is, we are still going to have high inflation because it will constitute money supply. When that happens, it means that we have to solve a problem, and by creating another problem. And that is why, for me, the advice have been, can we have an holistic review of our economy, so that tomorrow we don't say, oh, it's first subsidy again, it's labor issue the other day, and so on and so forth. Okay. So the issues are on the table, and I hope that those in government will solve them one at a time. You see, it's a good thing you talked about holistic review, but over the years, we've not been blessed with good leaders that can have holistic economic planning, 40, 50 years economic planning. And you were right. As of 1983, early 80s, I should say, 80, 81, 82, when the minimum wage was reviewed, it was between the 100 to the 250 threshold that finally arrived on a rate. And this was about $100 then, because Naira to the dollar was at some level of parity. About over 40 years after, we are still projecting a target around that amount, you know, a minimum wage. Even when we bumped up the figure after the Odoji Awards, it was still around that threshold. So it's always been that mark around 40 years. But the question is, how are we going to have holistic planning to add some other things as regards welfare in the economy, cost of food and things like that? And I talk about cost of food because now, today, Nigeria has one of the highest minimum wage threshold to cost of basic food. It's about 110% by some data that's just coming out.
One, how do we fix that issue in society? It's not minimum wage that carries you in other parts of the world, but there are things, subventions on the cost of food and things like that. Secondly, our revenue targets are dwindling because we're not churning out a lot of oil. We can't meet our OPEC quotas, we say today. Our crude oil theft that we made some gain on, it has retrogressed because we're doing about 1.2, 1.3 million barrels, which is less than the over 2 million mark we ought to do, probably with condensates. So let's talk about our revenue. And why is it that another quick win as regards revenue is not bringing in money? And I'm talking about mining. Only to think that most of the top exporters in this country are in that sector, the likes of your Segilolas of this world, are churning out some volumes as regards mining. But why is it not translating into government rev? I mean, that's another question we should ask. How can we raise revenue? So I've sectioned the two questions. Holistic line of the economy, looking at welfare and some other incentives to be able to bolster any minimum wage we have, and also talking about revenue.
Thank you so much. I will start with the revenue concerns. For me, Nigeria has capacity to generate up to 40 trillion naira revenue without further removing subsidy or adjusting the exchange rate. We sit in a place where we can generate up to 40 trillion naira for federal government and something close within the state government. The question is, are we ready to generate this money? And this will not mean we are raising taxes or that we are making life relatively inconvenient for people to live. No. So there are a lot of leakages within our system. And the challenge is we seem not to have the capacity to block those leakages. That's one. On the second part, we have a lot of mineral resources. And I was, very inquisitive when I saw the minister, the person of Mr. Alaje, manning that agency of government. And Mr. Alaje makes some very clear promises. But I think we may want to wait till he's a year in office to now review what the ministry was contributing to GDP and the revenue the agency have made, the ministry have made for government of his 1 year in office. And that means we still have to wait maybe a month or so to now compare what it has been in terms of promises. If there are challenges, what are the areas so that we can provide useful solution to that agency? Because if we don't get our mining sector right, the truth is that we will still complain no matter what government does with crude oil. We know that revenue is not sufficient for revenue, absolutely, for government and also for our reserve to help us. But what I know is that on daily basis, from Zamfara to Osun to Nasarawa, mineral resources are leaving the soil of Nigeria in commercial quantity, especially in private jets. And it's important for government to audit some of these points. And I'm happy when I heard him say that maybe some things have been done and they are not yet in public domain. But I know that authorities will look at this and make this information available to the public so that we can even say that we have made a major mark. But when we look at what we are seeing from finance, from Ministry of Finance and so on and so forth, we can say that some of these gains are at best very marginal. So looking at planning, for me, planning is everything. The Nigerian government over the years have planned. We have the first national development plan, second national development plan. Some plan even came before independence. The electricity we have today is because of plan. Rail is because of plan that we have. Now, but what has changed? We have economic recovery and growth plan that did not even have financial attachment to how much are we going to spend in order for us to achieve some of the goals. That is why that plan failed. If you score it, it has less than 15% of the target that was set by economic recovery and growth. Another came after that, which also did not achieve up to 40%. The question is, what plan are we going to run on? Just before President Buhari left office, there was another plan that came to the fore that is expecting government to spend 15%. We have a new government in place, even though from the same political party. But it's as though we have forgotten, we have jettisoned everything about the previous plan. The real challenge? The challenge here is that we do not have legislation backing those plans we have as a nation. If another person comes, all the things President Tinubu is doing, even though if he's a member of his party, the person we want to say he wants his own legacy, to come to the fore. So there is no way we can grow like a start and quench engine. One start, you have to look for another driver to take it. And all of this is having impact on the economy of Nigeria. So revenue is possible. Beyond that, we have telco where we can generate between 7 to 8 trillion naira more than what we are doing today. In fact, if you don't generate it, I can tell you, by the end of this year, there is likely going to be review of rate by some of these telcos. You know why? Energy costs, most of them are in Band A region. Energy cost has increased, cost of gas has increased, cost of steel has increased, cost of diesel has increased. The question is, are they going to keep giving us good quality data if some of the things their cost has increased, and say we want to now force them to charge the old rate? That is why it's important as government, before we adjust any rate, we need to look at the responsiveness that economists call elasticity or sensitivity of pricing before we make any adjustment. If we don't, it will surely have effect. That is why when people are making this decision, it's better for government to go back to its economic team and ask them, is it price adjustment? Is it tariff adjustment? Is it rate adjustment? What will be the implication? So that we don't just act and after that we now say, oh, sorry, we did not know that is the effect it will give us. So for me, looking at all of this, it's important we know that we still have a long way to go, you know, from revenue to what is happening around Niger Delta and so on and so forth. So then welfare, the reason why we have all this policy is the goal of government. What is the goal of government? Goal of government is to provide, to protect life and property of the people, to also give quality welfare to Nigerians. But here is it. You have market forces, which I see this administration implemented. But we should know that economics does not stop with market forces. We have market failure. When markets fail, then you are going to have government interference. John Maynard Keynes, the father of modern macroeconomics, which of course has to do with what we are discussing now, you know, it says that, you know, the classical economy will say that in the long run, everything will be fine. But John Maynard Keynes says that in the long run, we are all dead because the long run has no time. People will just say in the long run. Long run is after 5 years. After 5 years could be 50 years. It could be 100 years. We are still pursuing the long run. Meanwhile, we should have targets as to this is exactly what we want to achieve. And for all policies of government, no matter how sweet or painful it is, we must measure the impact on the life of people. Right. Will they make their life better? Will they make their life worse off? Yes. Is it just because we want to implement it for the sake of saying the world will clap for us? No. What matters is 7 million people added to poverty last year, not my figure. World Bank report said President Buhari gave 7 million people, and the President Tinubu implemented 2 policies. According to their report in June 2023, the President Tinubu removed subsidy and devalues the naira. Another 5 million people will join poverty bracket. Now, this is 2024. With what is going on, what we now mean, you know, we have subsidy, it's already gone, we have exchange rate, even though central bank is doing all effort to keep exchange rate low, but because it is stubborn, because there is a high level of speculation beyond the imagination of many, and of course, whether those people are friends of Nigeria or anyone is now obvious to us. Right. So, do we think that more people will become poor this year? It's looking so, and I hope that authorities will do the needful in no time.
That is what we hope for, that the authorities will do the needful in no time. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Alaje. You talked about the barrels per day in terms of production. We know it's 1.6 if you add condensates, and hopefully we're looking to shore up that value to 2 million barrels a day to show up the revenue that we have currently in Nigeria. But thank you so much for your time. Always an insightful session with you on the morning show.